Welcome to a special episode of Wellness Wednesday. In this episode, I interview college student Oliver Lin. He's a student here in Sarasota, Florida at the Ringling School of Art and Design. He's supposed to be a senior this year. I first met Oliver over a year ago. I was going to Ringling College for fitness, hula hoop fitness, what else? And I would hang out in the courtyard, hula hoop with students, get to know people, and basically I was brought in to help students kind of get out of themselves, get physical, and get out of their heads and their projects and get some movement going. So that I took that to heart. I love it. Oliver worked in the fitness area, and he would carry all my hula hoops back to my car with me every week. There I found out he was from Taiwan. He'd talk to me about his projects. I'd ask him how the week was going. And that's how I got to know Oliver. When the pandemic hit, I emailed Oliver. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Everything okay? I was worried about what was happening with him because we had a shutdown. We had airlines closed. I didn't know if he traveled home. Found out he had a place to stay. He was staying in the U.S. Eventually, Oliver traveled back to Taiwan in May. And this is a story about how a high school student ends up in Sarasota, Florida, going to school from Taiwan. It's about a college student who's living through a pandemic and what's happening for him right now. And it's also about how a college student views what his government is doing for him. I think you'll notice some kind of fascinating things about when he traveled home, what the domestic airlines were doing versus international airlines, and what he had to do when he got home to make sure he was doing what he needed to do for his family to stay safe and healthy. And so those are the reasons I wanted to talk to Oliver. But really, what brought Oliver back to my mind was an interview that I saw on CNN with Fareed Zakaria, and he interviewed Chien-Jen. And if I didn't pronounce that right, I'm sorry, but I'm doing my best. Chien-Jen, who was vice president of Taiwan. He is a degreed epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins University, and I was fascinated by that interview. And then I thought, hey, I should talk to Oliver. And so I connected with Oliver again, and we did a Zoom interview, and that's what you're about to see. If you see nothing else, the next little snippet is a lot about where they are at that point in time, which was October 27th, and where we were, and why they've only had, till this date, 7 deaths in Taiwan. And it's not because they're just a small country. Disease could have run rampant there, the same as it is here in the US. And SARS hit them very hard, so they took it very seriously as soon as they heard rumblings about anything out of Wuhan. And keep that in mind. It's not about the size of the country. It really is about the respect for the government, what they're doing. It's about leadership, good leadership, and it's also about doing something for the greater good. And I found all of this very fascinating. I've been working on interviewing this, and it's taken me a little longer than I wanted it to. And as I was writing my note cards for today, my husband said that we've crossed 300,000 deaths in the United States today. Today is December 14th, 2020. 300,000 deaths in the United States. Taiwan has had 7. I checked the numbers this morning. It's been 7. We have a vaccine that is now rolled out. The first U.S. person had it this morning. But those numbers aren't going to change just because that vaccine has hit the ground and is out there. We have a long way to go. And if you listen to nothing else, listen to this next little snippet that I included from the interview. And I want to thank you for spending time with me and for listening to my story and Oliver's story about Taiwan, what it means to be a student in the U.S., living through a pandemic, and what's happening now for him. So thanks very much. Enjoy.
Or there's like little breakouts within Taiwan. But then it's funny because even though we can people can say, oh, Taiwan has controlled it. I think the government as well as the CDC, we have daily CDC briefings where our head of CDC, he's actually become a celebrity now, but like just because everyone sees, like we see his face constantly. But they were just saying still that we need to not be content with the situation, and we need to continue to just do our part, wear your mask, take people's temperature when they go into restaurants or when they go into the gym. So everything is still in place and people are following or just listening to the government. I think that's, they're happy, we have trust that the numbers are low and, we believe that the system they have in place for us is working. So, why fix something that's not broken?
Well, clearly the numbers show that what your government's doing, it's not broken. I just, when you said the CDC guy, I'm sure you've seen here in the US, Dr. Fauci, who is been more or less sidelined by our president. So what are you doing these days?
So just been trying to keep myself busy, been doing a lot of like freelance video work. Been also getting the opportunity to go on like a couple of sets, like film sets or like commercial shoots in Taiwan. And yeah, and just working on film stuff like editing, writing, and then just spending time with family because like both my brothers are back, and this is like the first time the three of us are back together living here in Taiwan since like 4 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
my mom, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, my parents are pretty happy about that. And I mean, it's great to see them, but at the same time, it's a little annoying. I'm a little over it, but
Yeah, you know what?
it's
We were
good
kind of
times.
excited to get extra time with Cassie before she took off to college, because otherwise her spring would have been super, super busy and she would have been like all over the place. So we were like kind of excited to spend extra time with her, but she was like a little done with us by the time she went to school. So I actually did a little. You go to school at Ringling School of Art and Design. You're a senior, or at some point you'll be a senior and finish senior year. And how did you get to Ringling from Taiwan?
Yeah, so when I was looking at when I was in high school and I was doing the whole applying to film school, my parents originally wanted me to go study in the UK because both my brothers were there. But then
Ah,
it's always been a dream of mine to go study film in the US just because it's more practical compared to
interesting.
the UK where it's all theory based. And then I had one school in California that was like my dream school that I thought I could get into. But then Ringling was never on my list. Florida was never a location I wanted to go to. But then one of my college counselors, she was telling me about Ringling and how she heard about it and how she said it was a great school. And so I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to apply anyways. I applied, and then they got back to me saying that they would offer me like a scholarship. And this was like the only school that did this. And just out of pure shock and like, it was a great feeling. I started considering it more. And
Wow.
after I didn't get into school in California, my thought was that, okay, you know what, I might just go to the UK. But then I asked my parents if it would be okay for me to fly out to Florida and like look at the school, see how it is, and make my decision. And thankfully they said yes. I took a tour. I flew from the UK to Florida, was there for like 2 days, just took a tour of the school, and yeah, just immediately fell in love with the campus as well as like what the film program was offering.
Wow. So by contrast, when my youngest was looking at schools, we're like thinking New York is too far. And you're like, how many hours away?
I think usually when I fly back home, it's like a 24-hour plane ride, but it's 3 flights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, your mom's from the UK and your dad's from Taiwan?
Yeah. So
Is
my
that
mom's
right?
actually she's Welsh, but
Okay.
yeah, it's part of the UK. But yeah.
Okay.
So mom's Welsh and dad's Taiwanese.
It was interesting because I was looking at our notes and I mean seriously, I think I still have it up on my screen. I mean, you're watching what's happening around the world, I assume, and you have friends back in the US and COVID's kind of crazy right now. And I'm looking at these numbers and I'm looking at Taiwan and the number of cases in all of Taiwan have been 550 cases, 502 recovered with 7 deaths. And it it blows my mind because I kind of won't, like you worked in the gym at Ringling at the desk. I won't even go to the gym at my local place because they don't mandate mask wearing. And and I have an autoimmune condition. You and I have talked about that. And so I'm just like, 7 people have died. And so you and I emailed back and forth. So first thing, let's talk about your journey back to Taiwan because you didn't go right away. It turned out we saw each other just before spring break. And that's when everything in the US blew up. And so then you didn't go right back to Taiwan. You went and spent time with a family in Florida. How long did you stay in Florida? And then when did you go back to Taiwan?
So I was actually in Taiwan for winter break,
Okay.
and I remember flying back to the U.S. and like maybe 2 weeks later, the news started picking up about like Wuhan and how like the coronavirus has started from there and the outbreak. There was an outbreak, but in the U.S., not a lot of people were talking about it. It was more so like they kept saying, "Oh, it's like the seasonal flu. You don't have
So
to worry about it."
so you're talking about the news in Taiwan
Yeah, I'm
about
talking about, yeah.
Wuhan.
So when I left in December, no, actually when I left in mid-January, there was news about an outbreak. And then when I got back to the US, then I started hearing more and more about it. And I just remember my girlfriend's family, they were just like looking at us as though like we might have contracted the virus because we just came from Asia. And they were just like speaking in those terms that, you, I guess it was like in a kidding way, but they're like, oh, you could have potentially picked up the virus. And that's when I realized that people started talking about it. Like it was right after winter break.
Mm-hmm.
And then then spring break was when everything blew up. I remember went to LA. Yeah, went to LA to go see family and friends, and then came back from LA, and that's when everything shut down. And I think
Right.
that was also the time when Taiwan shut down their borders as well, meaning that they were only going to allow citizens back in or anyone with a working visa if you were a foreigner. And then, yeah, I think that's how I
And
remember it.
how long were you in Florida and when did you get home to Taiwan?
Yeah, so I was in Florida from uh, early March, like mid March until May 31st. I think that's when I arrived in Taiwan.
And then you quarantined.
Yeah, then quarantined for 2 weeks. And so the process of arriving to Taiwan was a little stressful because I was reading online that they would not let you board the flight to Taiwan if you had a temperature. So my concern was that I had to fly from Miami to Dallas, then Dallas to Seattle, then Seattle to Taiwan. And I was afraid that during those two domestic flights that, I could potentially contract the virus or could potentially get sick. But I took the necessary precautions, wore a mask, did all of that. And then when I got to Seattle, that was when I realized that like they were taking it more seriously than the domestic flights, because the domestic flights weren't taking my temperature. They didn't ask me to do like a survey as to like, oh, where have you been? Have you traveled anywhere? Um, and then before the flight going into Taiwan, they made everyone fill out their names so they could be put into like the Taiwan CDC server. So when you landed, people at immigration knew you were coming, and
Oh,
you just had to show them like you had to sign off on the fact that you were, by entering Taiwan, you were giving them permission to quarantine you. Yeah.
so when they quarantine you, what happens to you? Do you go home to
So
your family, or do you hang out somewhere they tell you to?
so there's two options you have that they allow you to. You number one is you can go to a quarantine hotel, and the only downside to that, it's pretty expensive. Number two is you can stay with your family and you can stay in the house, but they require you to be, either you live on a floor by yourself, or you are staying in a room that has a bathroom, so that you don't have to cross paths with anyone else living in your house. And
Wow.
they're pretty strict about it too, because they'll come like check up on you, and they will assign a local police officer to be in constant communication with you. And so
Wow.
for me, the minute I did my quarantine in the south of Taiwan, in a city called Chiayi, and I stayed in my grandparents' old house where no one lives in anymore. So I essentially had a whole floor to myself. And then the minute I got there, they would track you by your phone. So you had to give them your phone number, and you had to, you know, essentially give them your consent that you were agreeing to this. And you get there, and then they set up like a fence, like to basically
A
track you.
perimeter?
That Yeah, perimeter,
Okay.
where if you leave it, they get notified.
Really?
And yeah, and the thing was that, so when this whole quarantine process, when people started like flying in back into Taiwan in quarantine and started quarantining here, the news would call out people who broke their quarantine, and there was a huge fine. So it was like, you knew that yes, you could walk, like no one was like you weren't being held against your will. There was no security or nothing keeping you from walking out. But if you did walk out, people would eventually call you out in
You
on
know,
the news or on social media.
I had and I won't say his name right, so I'll let you say it. But I know that I had listened to Fareed Zakaria on CNN, and he'd had your um, leader. What is he called?
He was the vice president,
Okay.
and he's an epidemiologist.
Yep.
So he's a trained, certified epidemiologist.
From Johns Hopkins University.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
So,
and he isn't the vice president anymore. Our current president got reelected, and he decided. And when she did her second term, it's the same as the U.S. Our presidents do 4 years each term, two
okay.
terms if they get reelected. And he decided he didn't want to be in politics anymore, but he just wanted to focus more on his background in epidemiology. And
So, but interesting in all of that. I mean, you told me, now I had sent you a note, and this is sort of what got me thinking about this. You said that when SARS hit a number of years ago, Taiwan was heavily affected. And so when this came around, people listened right away. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about in the US, people are like, you're violating my rights. Why should I have to wear a mask? You can't make me. Did you have any of that happening in Taiwan?
no, I think in general, even if there isn't a pandemic happening, I think most people within Taiwan wear masks. It's just, I think it can come down to a cultural thing, but it can also come down to just I remember growing up growing up in Taiwan. Every time you went to school, you had students would just wear masks because they were sick, and their parents would tell them to put on a mask.
Oh, really?
So
So they didn't share it?
yes, so putting on a mask has always been like a normal thing. Like it's never, so when the government tells you to put on, I don't think anyone's suddenly like, oh, this is so different from, we
Interesting.
haven't had to do this before. I think Taiwanese people are just really scared of getting sick. Like they're
Okay.
terrified of getting sick. I would say like my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, they're all just like very, very scared of getting sick. It's just a thing. Yeah.
It's just a thing. Okay. Because somebody
Yeah.
actually did tell me that wearing a mask was, excuse me, fairly commonplace. And yet somehow, some way here, it's become kind of a statement, whether you do or you don't. And I just think, well, I when I saw the CNN thing, it was talking about the fact that if you had COVID, you were required to quarantine, and it talked about the perimeter that you could not leave. So if they call your cell phone and you don't answer it, they will check on you. And if you're not there, then you are fined. And so nobody wants that to happen. But what I thought was really, and I'll say this almost emotionally, because I'll try not to be emotional. Paused. Just that you would quarantine for the greater good of everyone around you, that you would give up 2 weeks of your life to quarantine so that you know you're not infecting other people, you know you're not causing harm to other people, and that for your community and your people, you're just going to take 2 weeks out. And I actually find it very interesting that a community, a society would do that, because I'm struggling as I watch people around here fight about their rights selfishly when, I have an autoimmune disorder. So I keep hearing people say, well, if you're at risk, then don't go out. And I'm thinking, how long do I stay in my house? And I'm really, really lucky because I live in Florida. I can get out, I can go to the beach, I can go for a walk. But I just find it amazing when I look at the number of deaths in Taiwan versus the struggles that we're facing right now. There's no end in sight right now because we have no handle on it, and we don't have a society that's willing to quarantine for the greater good, and not enough of them. We've got governors fighting to not have rules and regulations. Something you said was really interesting, and as I was looking at the emails tonight, you said by the end of that you never really had a full shutdown in Taiwan, and I realized you were in the U.S. for some of that, but you never had a full shutdown in Taiwan, and that that you'd pretty much recovered by, I want to say you said the end of January, but I'm not quite sure I'm right about that. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So I'm not sure when I think it started. They so early January is when there was no lockdown in place, but they did have you must wear a mask mandate on public transportation, as well as going to any public building or going to the shopping mall. It's still the same now, even
What
though
a great
we have
idea that is. What a great idea. Florida
and
doesn't even believe in it right now. And that's just such a great idea.
and
Go ahead, I'm
they
done.
would, yeah, they would make sure that you wouldn't, like, I remember the biggest thing was just like, oh, you couldn't eat on like the train. They would make sure that, like, please don't eat. That was when it was like getting bad, when
Okay.
the cases started coming in, or there was like little breakouts within Taiwan. But then it's funny because even though it, people can say, oh, Taiwan has controlled it. I think the government, as well as the CDC, we have daily CDC briefings where our head of CDC, he's actually become a celebrity now, but like just because everyone we see his face constantly. But they were just saying still that we need to not be content with the situation, and we need to continue to just do our part, wear your mask, take people's temperature when they go into restaurants or when they go into the gym. So everything is still in place, and people are following or just listening to the government. I think that's, they're happy, we have trust that the numbers are low, and we believe that the system they have in place for us is working. So why why fix something that's not broken?
Well, clearly the numbers show that what your government's doing, it's not broken. I just, when you said the CDC guy, I'm sure you've seen here in the US, Dr. Fauci, who is been more or less sidelined by our president, because now they're, and then Deborah Birx, who is part of that COVID task force, we don't even see them anymore. And the briefings were never by the CDC people, except for maybe way back. But then for some reason, President Trump just started fielding all the questions, and it's almost like stressful to listen to him talk. And I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, but it is. It's stressful to listen to him talk and know that, I mean, we're in the middle of an election, and he's out there at rallies saying, we're rounding the corner. We're rounding the corner. And it's like, to the third wave of it, we're rounding the corner. The numbers are astronomical, and in places all over the US. And it's just the reminder of, when I listen to Joe Biden talk about, some people are like, oh, he's going to shut us down. No, he's not. But he's really going to encourage you to wear a mask. And even Dr. Fauci said, if you just try it for like 6 weeks, everybody just try it, get on board. And Arizona had to do that because there was a really horrible outbreak in Arizona. They had fought about wearing masks, and they actually brought the numbers down. It was like huge. And even, before I put this all together, I'll see if I can find what those numbers were. So I just find, as you look at other countries, and what's so funny is some people were like, and I've talked about you. If your ear, did you ever hear the saying where your ears ringing? I've talked about you, and they were like, oh, well, you have to do it there. It's not a free country like ours. But I thought, when I listened to the doctor speak, and he said that you do it for the greater good, I thought, how can wearing a mask and giving up 2 weeks of your life, if you actually have COVID, be that big of a problem? I mean, some people are like, I have to give up 2 weeks worth of work or pay, or I'd have to pay to stay somewhere else. But if this is going to last another 8 months, couldn't you figure a way around the 2 weeks? I'm just kind of floored about, it's about health. It's not about rights per se. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, like, I've spoken to my friends in the US, friends in the UK, and they always will try to paint Taiwan in a different light, being like, oh, it's different. But I think at the end of the day, like, Taiwan is a democracy. Like, we have freedom of speech, freedom of choice. The government doesn't, they can't require you to do anything. Like, they're not going to lock you up. But I think it's just that after having gone through SARS, and after realizing that, because we had a lot more deaths during the SARS pandemic, and that was in 2003.
Yes.
I think that's when they really understood that this is going, if it happens again in the future, and it will be a huge problem.
And it will. And even the Obama administration recognized that. They left a playbook for it. And the Trump administration took apart the group or department that was supposed to make sure this didn't happen. And I don't know where the playbook went, but they didn't do it. I don't know. As I was reading this, and you said, I found this while you were talking. The economy experienced a major decline during the months of January until now because of the lack of tourists. And when you wrote that to me, it was March 25th. And I was thinking, in March 25th, I think we were still experiencing what was happening in New York and seeing it from afar. But when they finally took off the shutdown, people just acted like it was over. And without that reminder that you shouldn't get complacent, It's been a battle all summer. And staff on campus, and I saw her walk by, and I kind of scratched my head a little because at this point I'd already been watching all the numbers in Spain and Italy, and I was basically waiting for the numbers to creep up enough so I wouldn't have to travel with the group that my daughter was going with. I didn't want to be the person who said no, I won't go and trashed the trip, but I was horrified, and I was deeply scared and nervous. I bought Purell before other people. I was thinking I should have some masks because I wasn't sure what was going down. And as I was watching everything that was happening, I was thinking, I don't know how they can let us get on a plane. And I was actually going to the CDC website. And I don't know if you heard about the book Rage at all with our
No.
president. And now I'm
Oh
forgetting.
wait, the one written by Woodward.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
Bob Woodward. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then the tape set came out. And
yeah.
when he knew, supposedly right from China, he had all the answers and he was telling the American public, no problem, don't worry, but he didn't give us the information. Now, the comparison I made was you've lived through hurricane season in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Florida, when a hurricane's coming, they let you know, they give you the information. It's not good news that a hurricane's headed for you, but you need to have time to prepare. So we expect the government to tell us they know a hurricane's coming. We expect to know the timeline, and we expect to know how much time we have to prepare and or get out of town. And I'm thinking, by the same token, your country lived through SARS. They realize there has to be a preparedness plan, and then they have to let people know. Our country had information well in advance. It gave us time to get ready, but the president didn't want to give us that information. And I'm thinking, if somebody didn't tell us about a hurricane in Florida, we'd be like crazy people because we know how to do this. We buy our supplies. We either hunker down or we get out of town. I'm a get out of town person, but this this year I told my husband we have nowhere to go. So if a hurricane comes, we have to stay. Of what's happening, and then likewise testing. Now I assume you all started testing nearly immediately, or as soon as you could. Do you have any idea when testing started in Taiwan?
Um, I want
I
to say
didn't put
when
this on
the
my list of questions, by the way. So
yeah.
now I'm just
Uh,
talking off the
I'm
cuff.
I'm not sure, but I think it would have been in early December because I think that's when it's either November or December when the Taiwanese government got news of the outbreak in Wuhan and they started uh, screening planes flying in from Wuhan. But I want to say it's December, but I think at the time there was news of it, but no one was really paying that much attention to it.
Yeah.
I think it was only when the rest of the world, when the virus started traveling to the rest of the world, I think by that time, Taiwan was pretty ahead of it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's how we,
How did your,
being so close.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah.
No, you were saying because you're so close.
Yeah, so I think just being so close to China, but politically, Taiwan's relationship with China isn't that great. I don't know if you know much about it.
I was
They
hearing about
claim
that today, actually.
so they claim Taiwan as a rogue state. They still and they've openly said that they will take back Taiwan with force if necessary. So
Ah,
currently now the political climate is that people are talking about an invasion. They constantly harass our air force by flying in past the median line. So that's been going on for I guess the past 4 decades. But anyway, so they aren't very transparent with Taiwan in general because they choose not to recognize us. Most countries don't recognize us. We only have diplomatic ties with 8 countries right now, I think.
okay.
So it was great to see that even though we didn't have the help of the WHO, because they don't recognize us either, we were still able to take the information that our CDC had gotten from sources in China and act on it quickly instead of waiting for someone to tell us what to do.
Well, clearly that was a better plan for the people of Taiwan than
Yeah.
what we have.
No, it did pay off. Yeah.
Yeah, and staying vigilant because it hasn't gone away is probably a good plan too. How did you, as a college student, I'm kind of wondering, we've dealt with it on the, were we going to let our kid go to school? Okay, this is funny. Were we going to let our kid go to school 3 hours away um, as a freshman? How did your parents deal with what was happening? Well, you're a world away, and what were their concerns?
So I think when both my brothers arrived back in Taiwan, or sorry, my other brother, he was in the UK. One was already here. He flew back in, and then my parents wanted me to fly back as well. But I just told them that I wanted to finish the semester off first because I didn't want to deal with the time difference.
Ah,
And then originally I was like, okay, you know what's fine. I might as well just stay in the US for the summer, because like I have no problem with staying at home. I'm currently living with my girlfriend. Like the living situation is fine. Uh, I feel safe.
mm-hmm.
Uh, but then, so the only thing that led me to fly back was because my grandfather passed away.
Oh,
So,
I'm
so
sorry.
that's when, yeah,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's okay. So then I had to fly back for that reason alone. So then I was like, okay, I'll fly back. But then when I got back here, I was thinking, okay, like I'm gonna go back in June, July, um, August, to start my senior year. But then my school announced that they were going to go fully online for the first semester. And then because I'm Taiwanese, I'm required to do 4 months of military, and it's a mandatory thing. And I always thought about doing it after my graduation, or after I finished college in the US. But then I thought, you know what, like if my film school is going to go completely online, meaning that there's really nothing like nothing I can do in terms of like the practical side of it,
Yeah,
then maybe it's not worth the money, and maybe I should just take a year off.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a long process of just like constantly weighing out all my options, going through whether or not it would have been a good decision or not. But yeah, ultimately made the decision to stay here in Taiwan.
well, that's a rough decision all the way around. um it's been, I don't know, as far as actually. So your economy is kind of back up to where it was. I mean, restaurants are open, people are out doing the same things they always do. You said you were at some bike thing this weekend. Tell me what you were filming this weekend.
So I was filming a bike marathon. It's like 70 miles up a mountain, and it's called like the KOM challenge. And I was just part of the media team. I got hired as like a drone operator.
Oh,
And
yay.
yeah, so it was actually pretty fun. So I got assigned a motorcycle driver, and I would hop on his back. We would drive somewhere in front of the racers. I would get off, fly my drone, get the shot, and then keep going up. But it took a total of 3 hours by motorbike to get to the top of the mountain. Most participants completed the race in like 5 hours and 40 minutes. But the weather conditions at the top were like just terrible. It was like it was just heavy rain, strong winds, extremely
Oh,
cold. So yeah, I'm there on a motorcycle watch and looking to my right, and I just see people like killing it. Like they're just pedaling away, and they look like super tired, super drained, all soaked. And I'm thinking like thank God I'm not taking part in this race today.
wow, wow. So I'm really glad to hear that you're getting to do um, your media stuff and everything else, or at least getting some film work in while you're taking a hiatus for a year. I really hope that you'll be back next year in the
Yeah, no,
fall. I
I
hope
think
there's
that's
really
that.
plan to get you that. I mean, I hope the US actually gets to a place where you feel like you can come back. More importantly, that the schools will be, excuse me, open. You know, will you go back to Ringling as a senior and just sort of pick up where you left off? Unfortunately, didn't you sort of work with certain groups and cohorts, and now are you going to be shifted with a new group of people?
Yeah, so
I'm
going to
sorry.
be yeah, I
That's
mean that's
sad.
okay. I think yeah, that was also one of the deciding factors of whether or not I should take a gap year, just because I
Yes.
would be put in a cohort that I'm not I guess not that close with or haven't worked on multiple projects with. But I have a
Yeah.
couple of other classmates who also took a gap year. So
Okay.
I'll be seeing them next year as well. Okay.
And I'm really delighted that you were willing to do this with me.
Yeah,
Really
no, of
delighted.
course.
Yeah. I really,
I've
I'm going to be so excited when I can see people face to face. And I'm just going to be like a total weirdo, because by the time we get to the point where I can actually see people and hug them again, I'll be like, so awesome. You know, you can't hug people or go near them because you don't know. And, you know, I don't know when we'll get back to that. How is it there? Do people get near people, or is it because you're masked up and all of that, or do you still keep your distance and whatnot?
yeah, no, people, I don't think we people aren't really keeping distance, but everyone has masks on. And I think in
Okay.
terms like hugging or seeing family or being out in public, like, there is that physical interaction. We're not elbowing people, like, giving them a little, yeah. But I saw on your YouTube that how you and your husband threw uh, like a small neighborhood prom for Cassie. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I was showing my mom, and we just thought it was very, very cute. Yeah.
I've been to Mexico once. I've never been anywhere else. And so I'm very unworldly. So I'm living worldly vicariously through you. But I just think it's amazing that as young as you are, you're so traveled, and that you are like living through a pandemic, not just in your own house. I mean, you kind of moved through, you kind of moved back home in the middle of a pandemic, which is, I think, as far as a mom perspective, is a great place for you to be. Because as a mom, I worry about Cassie 3 hours away, not a world away. So I'm glad you're there. I don't know how your girlfriend feels about that, but I am glad you got to be home with family, because it's not fun here. But as communities go, I love Sarasota because there's plays and lots of fun things and a really cool school and
Yeah.
things like that. School, your school.
No, yeah, I really do miss Sarasota, and I really do miss Florida.
I bet.
Um,
I bet you do.
yeah,
Well, I'm looking forward to chatting with you again, finding out more about your experiences as you muddle through what should have been your senior year. And I hope that, truly, truly hope that our country gets our act together so that you'll be able to come back. This, she doesn't know any different, so it's as good as it gets. And
yeah,
then when
no,
things get better, she'll be like, wow, you know?
yeah. It's just start low, go high.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. That's totally it. That's totally it. So
There's more. Yeah,
yeah. So I'm wondering, can I make this go? Do you do Zoom? I want to make it go side by side. Can I make it go side by side?
yeah. So I think if you click gallery view, it should be on your
Ah,
top. Yeah, then it'll make you go side by side.
now I feel smart. Thanks, Oliver.
No problem.
Oh, are you not going to look at Oliver? This
Oh
is my
no,
dog.
so cute.
Her name's Cocoa Bean because she
And
was as chocolate as her nose when we got her. So she looked like a little teeny cocoa, little bean. There, so you say hi. She
how
never,
old is she now?
she's 3. And she gets all her attention since Cassie's off at school.
That's good.
I saw your face. Do
She-
you miss school?
Uh, not. I mean, not. Not really. I guess I
No?
miss my classmates more. I guess just being
Sure.
in that environment.
Yeah,
But in
yeah.
terms of like classes, no, not really. Yeah.
I actually meant more your classmates.
Oh, what during?
Missing your classmates. Your
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. No, I do miss my class.